Good morning and welcome to this morning scoop presented by the Arizona Capital Times. Our topic today is Arizona workforce building tomorrow's talent ecosystem. I'm Steve Goldstein. We'll be examining the key challenges facing Arizona's workforce, including an aging labor pool, limited awareness of career pathways, and significant skills gaps. We'll explore how these obstacles are affecting the skilled trade sector and the broader Arizona economy. Additionally, we'll highlight the importance of collaboration among chambers of commerce, economic councils, and workforce boards to align training programs with regional job demand. And we have an outstanding panel of experts to discuss all those topics today. Dr. Scott Spurgeon is superintendent of WestMec. Deb Furlong is business and workforce development with the city of Phoenix. And Scott Holman is founder and CEO of HHR Consulting, LLC, currently supporting Amcor Technology. Again, thank you all so much for taking the time today. We'll have opportunity for Q&A from those of you who are watching us live. Ask any questions of any of the panelists, and I'll get to them as soon as I possibly can. But first, I want to have Dr. Spurgeon join us to further explain the purpose of this morning's scoop. And Dr. Spurgeon, I would hope people watching this know what WestMec is, but if they don't, give us a Cliff Notes version of that too, please. Good morning.
So good morning, Steve. Good morning, everyone. So the purpose really this morning, Steve, is to really open up the conversation around highlighting the demands for the skilled trades and really its impact across the Arizona's economy. Now, I think people need to know and understand that there's not going to be one solution to meeting those workforce demands. It's going to take really collaboration and everybody pulling in the same direction on the same rope to ensure that we're all doing our part to provide the skilled workforce necessary for the Arizona, the Phoenix area. But Arizona is exploding in growth. I mean, no matter which area of Phoenix you look, I mean, there is growth everywhere. In fact, if you decide not to go someplace you normally do for a couple of weeks, you'll come back and be surprised with how vertical some of the buildings and some of the growth is happening. But a lot of people don't know a lot about WestMec. So let me give you just a brief overview. WestMec is a public high school career and technical education district, and we serve almost the entire West Valley of Phoenix. So really from Paradise Valley to our east, to Saddle Mountain to our west, to Gila Bend to our south, to Wickenburg to our north. We serve almost 4,000 square miles in the West Valley. We have four central campuses, and we serve about 3,100 students on those four central campuses. And then we have 12 high school or K-12 comprehensive high school districts that we serve. We receive students for over 130 high schools in the West Valley and serve nearly 45,000 students across West Phoenix in career and technical education. WestMec offers 36 unduplicated career and technical education programs. All those programs attached to it are a high value credential, which means the students who complete those programs can go right out into the world of work and take that credential and start their position immediately in their career pathway. So that's a little background on WestMec and our service to the West Valley.
Thank you, Dr. Spurgeon. I'm sure we'll be getting back to some more detail about WestMec as the conversation continues. But let's open up questions. And Scott Holman, I want to start with you. When the topic of talent gap and skilled trades comes up, it's really important to understand what the challenges are, why they've emerged. Tell us what some of those challenges are.
Where do I start, Steve? And again, thanks for having me on this morning. It's a pleasure to be here with Dr. Spurgeon and Deb from the city and my partners in crime on a usual basis. But gosh, where do you start? Aging workforce, right? A good one. Lack of awareness for career opportunities. I would add to that lack of people, kids, and their parents understanding that there's companies in the valley, who they are, what they do, and they got great paying jobs, right, for their kids right out of high school, right out of a community college, or right out of a major university. And I will use a statistic real quick and say last year's data was 553,651. And you go, what's that? That's the number of junior high school and high school kids in the state of Arizona, and they or their parents might even know that your company even exists, right? So I think that's huge. The other piece, and a topic we'll talk about further today, I think, is what are the skills required to land an entry-level job in any one of these companies at a high rate and with career opportunities once you join.
So Scott, let me follow up with you before I go to Dr. Spurgeon and Deb for their thoughts on this. One of the things that often comes up, because this is such a growing community, and we are focused obviously on WestMec, we're focused on the Valley, but this is not a unique issue to Arizona, right? This is going on nationwide as far as
Everywhere.
having, yeah, I think,
Everywhere.
yes, I think that's so. Dr. Spurgeon, let me go to you as a quick follow-up on that. So what is I want to ask more about what is unique about WestMac in preparing some of the people to meet these challenges and meet them as soon as we can, especially with an aging workforce. We don't really have time to dilly-dally on this.
Steve, one of the greatest things that we do at WestMec, I believe, is all of our programs are required to have advisory councils. And so we have business industry that sit on those councils, and they drive about 95% of our programmatic requirements and the things that we offer for our students. Couple that with student interest, because you can offer as many programs as you want, but you can't fill the programs up. It's literally a waste of time and money. And so we spend a great deal of time accessing the information available to us from business and industry, not just through our advisory councils, but also we probably have 25 WestMec members that sit on a number of committees around the Phoenix area to continually feed us that information and get the feedback that we need to offer the types of programs. The issue that we face sometimes, Steve, is oftentimes the information we receive from some places is too late. So for an example, when I first got here, one of the things that I asked was the Arizona Commerce Authority to allow WestMac to be a part of their pitch teams for potential companies coming into the Phoenix area. Because if we can know something 16 or 18 months ahead of time, it's easier for us to be able to plan and prepare for those programs and get teachers and set up equipment and things like that than for a company to come in and be set up. And then 6 months after they're operational to come and ask WestMec what we can do for them. So again, that's one of the greatest challenges is for us to get the right information at the right time, for us to be nimble enough to offer programs and services for our students to prepare them in a timely manner, coming out in the business and industry. The other thing I want to mention, Steve, and I don't want to step on any toes here, but we still have a society that continues to push students towards that college degree. And sometimes people say, well, students that attend CTE really aren't the students cut out to go to college. Well, I want to change that narrative and say, I think college is for everyone. It may not just be the entire experience. 72% of my students that come out of WestMec go into post-secondary opportunities. About 28% then go out into the world of work. And so I think college is for everyone. So I think that there's kind of a mist out there that CTE is somewhat less than the students going into that post-secondary opportunity. So that's also a challenge for society itself to continue to push the great things that happen through career and technical education and the value we provide for producing that workforce necessary for Phoenix.
Yeah, that opens up an interesting topic as well. The idea of perception of how things are seen in CTE, and yet from stories I've heard, maybe it's just anecdotal, folks who may or may not go on to a more traditional college experience that Dr. Spurgeon mentions, they may get out of high school and make a lot more money than someone who goes through 4 years of college will, and they'll be able to start their career and get going on that a lot sooner. Without jumping around too much, what are some of your thoughts about what Dr. Spurgeon said about CTE, about raising awareness, about being involved in the early stages?
I have so many thoughts. It's just like I'm rolling with so many great comments that he talked about. I first want to address the thought about being at the pitch table. I think Phoenix has identified that workforce development is critical to our community and economic development. And that's why at City of Phoenix, our workforce board actually sits in community and economic development. Dr. Spurgeon is correct, right? If I'm finding out after I already engaged someone and it's 2 years later and now we're trying to build their workforce, we're a little behind the game. So I think that's strategy and being intentional when we're bringing folks. Arizona is a growing community. We're getting tons of folks in the Valley, and being there at the front end when I'm engaging an employer to sit in that room and identify what those needs are and start beginning to scan the area and getting our education partners up and ready for what's coming. I think that's critical. And not just in Phoenix, but all over the Valley. And how are we intentionally doing that ahead of time, right? This at the end, when we're trying to catch up is a little bit more challenging. I think this thing about awareness, Scott spoke about it as well as Dr. Spurgeon, like awareness with families, right? Parents are such a critical component.
Yes.
And so them understanding how great those, I will guarantee you, our mayor jokes that the technicians that we're working with in our apprenticeship program with TSMC will be making more than her very, very soon. Her and Governor always joke about how they're creating a pathway to make more money than them. And I think it surprises folks, right? I think they go, wow, wait. And that's, I think, part of our role here too, is to educate parents. College is a great thing. And I think I also want to get on this train too, that just because someone isn't we're looking at career and technical skills doesn't mean that they're not going to college, right? Maybe as they were talking about, the pathway may look a little different. We've got some apprenticeship programs that in your mind you're thinking, oh, they're just apprenticeship programs. Actually, we're working with the community college for them to get the classes there, so they will be engaged at the community college. They will be educating themselves and learning at the same time. However, with working with places like Westmac, they're actually getting all that education while they're in high school. So imagine for me as an apprenticeship program working with TSMC, I've got those graduates coming from Westmac. They already have the education. Then I'm just focusing on the technical, on the job skills training. So I think there are a lot of things that need to happen, and I think it's going to take a lot of us a little bit. I have this dream that junior achievement will create a little semiconducting world in their space, right? It was one of my favorite activities with my daughter, right, that exposed her to the different careers that were in our community, right? So we've got to start talking about what the opportunities are. We need to dispel the rumors about college education or what career and technical education means in our community,
Absolutely.
and working together to achieve those goals. Okay, I'll stop because
Well,
like
I
I said, there
That's
was
kind of
like,
yeah.
Deb, I want to jump in on that, and I think it's again maybe an awareness thing, right? So if you graduate from a West SMEC with the right skills to go in a industry, whether it's trades, whether it's semiconductors, advanced manufacturing, mining, right? Doesn't matter, right? You're coming out with some basic skills that are fundamental that the company has defined with West SMEC that lands you an interview, right? And then there's the professional skills that help you land it through the interview. But my point here is not that, hey, this is entry roll right to high school and you stop, right? Industries owe students and their parents, here's the career pathways while you're in the company, right? But here's the other thing. Most companies offer tuition reimbursement. So it may not be college now. It may be go get a high paying job and get some experience under your belt. And then maybe you go back and then the company pays for you to actually go get a degree, whether it's a 2A, a AA degree, or whether it's a certification, or whether it's a 4-year institution. And if you do well, you get reimbursed for that. So now you've gotten your education for free while you're making money and you're going down a career path in a company. Right?
that's right.
And Dr. Spurgeon, it strikes me that people who start on that path with Westmac are able to have not only get on it earlier, as Scott and Deb both said, but just the idea that it is a different path that may lead them to something a lot sooner than other people can get, while not missing out on these other opportunities later. It just seems like it's a path that is not talked about enough. That's why awareness is something I wanted to ask you more about. Other than a panel like this and some of the partnerships you're talking about, how is raising awareness going? Because Westmac, I've lived in the Valley most of my life. I know what Westmac is. A lot of people don't. How do you make it so people understand even more the opportunity that a Westmac is offering? Westmac is unique.
So interesting enough, I'm going to play off of what Scott said just a minute ago. I tell people all the time that, once a student walks across the stage and graduates, life gets more expensive. And so our motto is to be a faster way forward, to get students as much as we possibly can for them to be successful in life before they walk across that stage. And every single one of our credentials, Steve, I say this all the time, has the ability to change an entire generation of family and put them on a new pathway and a new trajectory to change lives, to do life differently. But for Westmac, we do a great job in branding ourselves. I mean, everything you see all has branding on it and marketing on it. Our issue is this: we certainly don't have enough spaces in our central campuses to cover as many students that want to be at Westmac. For an example, through our enrollment process just this year, there's 2,500 to 3,000 students that are eligible to be Westmac students that will never get in because we don't have enough spots for them. So in our marketing and branding, we know very quickly, number one, that there's not enough spots. Number two, a greater challenge is the students to be able to access our programs in transportation. And that's a huge challenge for us. So oftentimes we may send a lot of information home through social media, through emails, but most of that goes into file 13 because the students know because of transportation, they can't get to Westmac anyway. I think we do a great job of branding ourselves and making the community aware of our opportunities. It's just whether or not parents, as we talked earlier, do they understand? Steve, we're working with a generation of parents that never stepped one foot inside of a fab. of a lab or a manufacturing environment. And so how do you overcome those obstacles of giving a better understanding with the lack of understanding of parents that they really don't know and understand what's available? So for an example, I mean, many parents nowadays still feel like it's kind of the dirty shops and my son or daughter's going to grow up with dirty hands the rest of their life and they're really never going to have much of a great life, but that's completely false. I mean, things have completely changed. And so our job is to show them with data. So as we graduate more and more students and the success of those students coming out in those career pathways is a testament to the great work and the great foundation that Westmec has put together for those students, for them to make their own choices, Steve. And that's what makes it so powerful is we give students the opportunities and the skill sets to make their own choices to eventually get to some financial freedom and some independence in their ability to determine their own pathway and their own way forward.
That's great, Dr. Spurgeon. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to add on to this and maybe a tangent from it, but what's Dr. Spurgeon is talking about, there's a part here where the industry, right, and the companies within industry owe, right, education like the Westmecs or getting out in the community more information about what they do, those great paying jobs. And I think what happens more often than not is a company goes and talks to Dr. Spurgeon or goes to talk to X person in education. They say, I need this, right? And then another company under the same industry comes in and says, hey, Dr. Spurgeon, I need this as well. I think what's missing, and Dr. Spurgeon hit it from the first when he introduced this piece, it was around there's not a whole lot of collaboration that happens with industry either that tells educators, hey, collectively for entry-level jobs, we need this basic skill set. Well, that's not, it's no longer, you know, if I do it well for me, I get all the resources. It's now, if I do it collectively, it helps the industry. It helps us as individuals to prepare a talent pipeline. I think the workforce is there. The talent pipeline doesn't exist, right? So how do we fill the talent pipeline with ready now skilled talent who can make a decision when they graduate from high school, right? Yeah. So industry, I think, owes a lot of the meat. The other thing, sorry, Deb, one last thing, right? The other thing I want to say is industry, along with education, owns defining to students and their parents, if my child wants to go down that direction in that industry, what are the many pathways that they can go down for whatever economic situation they're in? It won't always be one solution. It has to be several. And today we're not communicating to kids or their parents, here are the multiple pathways you have in front of you to get to that industry. Sorry, Deb.
No, Scott, I just was excited about what you were talking about. And I really appreciate everyone at the table. And, you know, we're talking about, you know, chambers of commerce, city and education. That employer is that big piece. And I appreciate the word you use, Scott, that maybe owe that to the community, right? Like, and to be a vested part. And I think as education partners too, also honoring that, like, and really hearing them. Because I've been in rooms where education, you know, where employers show up and education doesn't hear. And and then I've heard where, you know, the opposite that happens, right? And I hope that the conversations can continue to happen and we could really hear about that pathway. And for parents, understanding the skills, right? Like, that these are skills and they can cross over many. We're working, in fact, one of the gentlemen that's leading one of our apprenticeship right now was in construction, but now he's in semiconducting, crossing over those skills, right? Really seeing the pathway. It's not narrowly defined this way. You're almost like you can hop from here to here, taking skills and really advancing yourselves. And I think that, I also think this place, as we talk about young folks too, is employers understanding that role in mentorship and leadership when it comes to those work-based skills. Like, you know, I've got my skills, like I know how to open this and pick up this tool, but also some of those learnings. And I think employers need to have a different approach when working with young people and creating an environment where people can learn to be successful. I'm finding too that some of my employers, like, get someone young in there, and then they don't create the environment to help grow that with individuals. I've been in working for 20 years. I have fallen down, written emails I shouldn't have. I've engaged in conversations I shouldn't have, right? And that all was through learning. And I think if we're looking at this space with young people and engaging, how as employers can we create that environment for them to be successful and learn and grow? So I just want to add that little piece when it comes to that employer engagement and being at the table.
Steve, let me jump in.
Go
Can I
ahead.
jump
Yes.
in real quick, Steve? So
Please, sure.
one of the things that I did when I first got to Westmec in July of 22, I recognized that there were businesses that really had no skin in the game. They would show up at the end of the graduation, and they would kind of cherry pick our kids, through career pathways. And so we came up with a strategic partnership model. In that now, in order to get to that strategic partnership, it's a 50% Westmec, 50% business and industry. And there's some accountability metrics and some standards there and return on investments. And that we evaluate those partnerships, because it can no longer be that Westmec is doing 100% of the work and you're receiving 100% of the benefit. So now we're asking business and industry to become an active participant with mock interviews, with developing resumes and letters and those kinds of things that will attract students. Because the real issue, Steve, is about relationships. So you can do all the work. Westmec can do all the work to prepare the students. They come into an environment, and if they haven't established that relationships, oftentimes those relationships end very quickly. So when a business and industry decides to come in and work with Westmec, they're going to have to be a strategic partner. They're going to have to be in the classrooms. They're going to have to be delivering content. They're going to have to allow our students to be work-based learning opportunities. All those kinds of things create that family-like atmosphere, because if you want sustainability, if you want productivity, the relationships have to start from the very beginning, and we've established that relationship in the model that we do now. So it's a 50% Westmec, 50% business and industry. Here's the big issue, Steve. Oftentimes business and industry they really don't know what you're asking them to do. And oftentimes we don't tell them. At Westmec, we tell you, these are things that we need for you to do for us. Here's what we're going to do for you. So we began to develop what's called a playbook. And it's a business and industry playbook, so that when business and industry have new folks coming online, here's who you call, here's who to contact, here are the steps in the process. Because oftentimes new employees in business and industry don't know who to call, who to talk to, where to start. And I've said this for the last 2 years, Steve, if we can get two people in the same room that can just say yes, magic can happen.
Mhm.
Terrific point. Terrific point. I'm going to veer off a little bit, but Deb, I wanted to ask you one quick follow-up, and the rest of the panel can jump on this as well. One of the things you mentioned that really struck me was this concept of getting the young people in there, and maybe the environment they go into isn't as great or whatever. And to me, what really struck me is I'm a big fan of whatever industry, of institutional knowledge. And we talked about the aging workforce. And if you get in a situation where, and maybe Dr. Spurgeon, what you're talking about is the playbook, the communication is better. But what happens when you don't have the people who are engaged enough to help train the young worker specifically to what that particular company or that particular business needs? And I know Westmec can prep it, but how important is it to make sure that there is someone to be that guiding hand to say, okay, you learned a ton at Westmec, we've been in communication, but this is really what we need you to do. All of you sort of mentioned this back and forth communication, but when it gets down to the individual there, how important is it once that young person gets to the business to actually be able to have a mentor to some extent?
It's the critical piece. It's probably why I love apprenticeship so much, is because they naturally bake in this mentorship and acknowledging that folks on the job need that kind of learning, understanding even just the culture, even if it's not just how you pick this wrench up and do this job. It's we don't actually book the South room for meetings because of X, Y, and Z, right? Having someone to guide you along is critical in success. And I think about my own career. I was in social services, right? And I think even about this telework thing. I learned so much of my skills, never from just sitting down and engaging, but listening to people around the room and hearing the conversations they were engaging in, the kind of questions they were asking of both folks around them and their leadership. Like that kind of learning is just, you can't really teach all of that in a classroom, right? It's a natural kind of learning environment. But I think as employers, right, like understanding the role, like we're intentionally working with young folks, that we're creating this pathway. Part of that will be as leaders, how do we bring them in? How do we set up, what is their first couple of weeks like at the job? Who do they have a lunch partner? Do they, how are they walking to meetings? Really, just those critical moments in the beginning too can really set the stage for success or non-success. And as we talk with specifically about young folks, right? My daughter entered this workforce really during the pandemic, and I worried about her not being around people that could guide her. That naturally came from me. And so I think as employers, just number one, again, we keep talking about awareness, right? Just being thoughtful and teaching classes within your leadership and natural about how to be mentors, how to be good coworkers. What does that look like? And creating that environment and the culture that's rich for engagement and learning and growth, both internal and external.
Deb,
Go,
I
Scott,
think you
go ahead.
hit, yeah, I think you hit something on the head, and that's right. The industry, the companies themselves have to do some education, right? Some prep work. How do you bring in, right, a new employee? So I agree 100% with that. The other thing I latched onto with you was the apprenticeship, right? And you could say internship. And I've been on this recent rant of, okay, those are great programs, but not everybody gets to participate in them. And so my rant has been, then how do you give your future workforce exposure to what they're going to be doing when they hit the floor day one, right? And in my brain, I thought about, well, industry needs to articulate a day in the life of, pick that job, right? Oh, you show up at 6:25, right? Because you got to be at your workplace at 6:30. Semiconductors is my life, so I will use that example, right? So, then you got to go into the clean room and you have to don a bunny suit that takes you 5 minutes. Well, maybe I need to show up at 6:20 now to make sure I'm at the workplace at 6:30. So you don your bunny suit. Well, that's an experience in itself, right? And you've never done it before, even though you might have a trainer that's showing you how to do it that day. It can be overwhelming, right? And then you got to get to a tool and you got to put 2 sets of gloves on and try to, take notes on a pad of paper, clean room paper, of course, right? Or, you need to push a button on a screen to access something. And this is the first time they ever figured out that was a part of their job. And then they walk around in a bunny suit for 4 hours before they get their first break, right? And then they get a lunch and their hair's messed up and they maybe had to take off their makeup and right. And all of a sudden they got to go back in 35 minutes later or whatever the lunch break is. But industry, I think in partnership with the WestMex and with the boards that we have out there, need to get more explicit on this is the job you're going to do before you even take it or say yes, because it pays you so well, right? Because the turnover, and I won't mention my last company, but the turnover for entry-level jobs, because that was not in place. And you could argue it's other variables as well, right? But was very high because we hired people that really didn't know what they were getting themselves into, right? And I think that it's true for any of the trade work, right? That advanced manufacturing and mining, it's across the board. And maybe some do it well. I got to figure it out, right? Semiconductors, I don't think we do it very well. Right. So we got to figure out how to set them up for success, not only technically, not only professionally, but also here's what you should expect on day one and then your life, right? At least however long you're in this job, this is what it's going to look like every single day. Oh, by the way, it's 3 on, 4 off, 4 on, 3 off. So you're getting a 3-day weekend every single week. And every other week you get a 4-day weekend. I was like, sign me up. Right. So anyways,
Steve, let me jump in. I want to go back to your original question was, how do you ensure the success when students actually get into the workplace? And the very first thing that we do at WestMec, and I want to toot Holman's horn here in just a little bit, but oftentimes when students get into the workplace, business and industry will not evaluate students based on the job description, so to speak. So when Holman was at TSMC, he's been one of the greatest partners that we've ever worked with. One of the things that I asked him to promise me was that when we designed our programmatic requirements for our semiconductor program was I wanted a technician from the floor on the design team so that we can know and understand the exact skill sets that our students would be performing when they walk into that environment. And so we did that. So we're going to be able to produce equipment, facilities, and maintenance technicians for the semiconductor industry based on the fact that we didn't use a job description. We used a technician that's on the floor every single day saying, these are the top 10 most important skill sets your kids have to have. So when we talk about importance, it all starts from the very beginning. What are you actually going to be doing? What are you actually going to be evaluating me on? And how can I ensure that you're successful knowing that to begin with? If not, then you may have a list of 25 different skill sets on a job description. You walk in and you find out your first day that, wait a second, nobody prepared me for this, just like Scott was saying. So that's been one of the most important partnerships that we've ever had since I've been here at Westmac, is looking at what kids are actually going to be doing and building those skill sets, important skill sets, into our program to ensure the greatest level of success for all of our students.
If I could just jump, I think that is so important. As a workforce person, I continue to work with employers from human resources departments, which I value, right? They definitely are a gatekeeper and opportunity in, but really understanding like the person on the floor and what that task is so that we can help prepare the individual that we're working with to answer the interview questions, and to really, I think that right there, workforce boards, chambers of commerce, we get to hang out with your HR folks, great folks. But when we're developing curriculum for an apprenticeship, I can't have that person in the room. I need the floor manager. I need the person who's actually doing the job. And maybe that's another nugget here too, that Westmac has really latched onto, is the right person in the room. I need the HR folks and I need the floor manager, because both of those are critical to understanding the skill set that we need to teach the individuals to get in there. Sorry, just that's such a
It's very important. Yeah.
Deb, us HR people are pretty awesome, just so you know.
You are amazing.
Just want to point that out. But HR
and I can't get in the door without you, Scott, right? I can't get in that door.
So HR is that enabler, right? You need them, what you said, but they're not the content expert. I would never say that. And I worked in semiconductors for 37 years, right? I would never say I'm the expert of what a technician does today, or what a manufacturing specialist does, or an engineer for that matter. But I know some people, right? Do this job every single day. And my job as HR is to enable that connection. Maybe I facilitate it, right? We did this pretty well at the previous company, I think, that Scott just mentioned, right? Well, we brought a technician in, we brought the manufacturing manager in that says, here's how I'm going to measure your performance, right? And the person on the floor says, oh, by the way, this is what I do every single day. Can you, oh, we don't need that. We need this in your curriculum, right? This is very important. So I think it's that partnership. It's not sending your PR person to a workforce development board or just the HR. And maybe, again, they're the enabler, but you need those experts who know what they're doing every single day to give Westmacs of the world, right? Or of Arizona, if we limit it, right? Here's what they do. And here's what I think I need you to teach, right?
And Scott, since we're about halfway through now, I want to remind folks who are watching us live to send in questions. If you have any questions, we will get to them. We have a couple. We're going to try to get the panel to answer here in a few minutes. Dr. Spurgeon, one question we haven't really answered yet. We've sort of been around the fringes, but talked about in the past, when I was a journalist, is Arizona, is the Valley going to become the Silicon Desert? Obviously, TSMC would be part of that. But I know there are other industries, and I want to make sure that some of them get the headlines, others don't, but still provide a really good career pathway for folks. What are some of the other industries that Westmac is involved in that they're training folks to get in that workforce?
So one of the coolest partnerships we have, Steve, we established a couple of years ago. We are now the only official CT sponsor of Phoenix International Raceway and NASCAR. And so one of the things I wanted to get, again, I say this all the time, but my students can see it, they can be it. And oftentimes there's that opportunity gap that students don't get out enough to be able to see the kinds of things that they could be. Mm-hmm. And so we established this partnership. So twice a year, about 180 or 200 of my students at Westmac get to participate in Championship Weekend and the Menard Series. So, for example, my automotive technician students get to work with the technicians of the race cars in the pits. They get to work with it, and our welding students get to see how the cars are put together. Our medical assisting students work on the infield with anybody that gets sick during the day of the races. Our law and public safeties work the stands, they work the parking lots, they work the RV, little what we call them small cities out there during Raceway. And so those are the kind of partnerships where you give kids the opportunity to see what's possible. The other partnership that I'm very excited about was with Nestle. We worked with Ray McGuire, their plant manager, when they were building it, even before they broke ground out there, about what kinds of technicians can Westmec help you produce or produce for you to be able to work in the new Nestle plant. And so we worked on things like it's called electrical mechanical technician. And so they visited our Southwest campus well before they broke ground on the actual facility. And so now we continue to feed those students and technicians out to Nestle, and they just had their groundbreaking or their ribbon cutting ceremony a couple of weeks ago, and their production is up and rolling. So that's just kind of an example. I mean, we have advanced manufacturing, we have aesthetics, we have cosmetology, we have all those programs we send kids out. And we do surveys, Steve. That's how we determine the success of our students. We survey our employers about how well prepared were our students, how well do they get along with others, how are their communication skills, what do those soft skills look like, are they getting along with others, are they showing up every day on time? So all those things are feedback mechanisms, because here's the bottom line. Westmec has a brand, and our brand is producing high quality career and technical education professionals. And so we have to ensure that the students that are leaving us are well equipped to be successful, because a lack of success means a lack of success for Westmec in its entirety.
Hey, Scott,
Yes.
great point. I want to jump in real quick, if you don't mind, Steve, because I was actually privy to one of these great partnerships that happened with Westmec, and I want to talk about it very briefly. So, and it's not the sexiness of it, right? It's manufacturing, it's food and beverage, right? Nestle is a part of it, but there's a group of companies that got together in food and beverage manufacturing. And I will give a shout out to Jeff over at PepsiCo, who spearheaded the whole thing, but he got Wholesome Foods in, he got Nestle in there, right? He got Mark Anthony Brewing in there. And they said, what do we need in food and beverage manufacturing collectively, curriculum wise? And Scott's team partnered with this small group and said, what do we need to do to build a curriculum so we're feeding you guys, the technicians, right, in the food and beverage manufacturing area? It was, I'm going to say it was that easy. It was simple, right? Scott, I think we need to help here. And then you get the small group together and they meet and they talk about what they can do and partner together. And that's something I think Dr. Spurgeon and the whole Westmec team does very, very well, is they go, what do you need? Industry, what do you need me to build for you? And they partner with us and they do it. Right. And I'm excited about Amcor because we're coming in fast. We got about 2 years before we hire. Right. And I'm working with Dr. Spurgeon and Westmec on what does that look like? Right. What do I need to do today to produce students and potential future employees for Amcor in 2 years? Right. And I think more industry needs to be at the forefront of not only what I need now, but what does my pipeline look like and how do I generate that? And then it gets back to awareness and marketing, right? A good job that we're doing there. But I wanted to highlight just that food and beverage with Dr. Spurgeon because it's a great example.
But Scott, I don't know how much you can give us here, but I would love to pull back the curtain since you have been involved in so many of these things. As you mentioned, you're involved with Amcor at this level, at this point in time. So without giving away any secrets, what are some specifics that you, since you are right in the trenches, that you are asking Westmec that you're looking for in other aspects?
Day in the life. What's a day in the life of an Amcor operator look like? What's the day in the life of a technician at Amcor? It's going to be a little different than the Intels and the TSMCs because it's the back end manufacturing. It's where the wafer goes when it needs to go into a packaging. Sidebar story, kind of funny, right? So I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, and someone asked me what Amcor did. And I said, packaging this and packaging that. Like everybody knows what back-end manufacturing and semiconductors is. And the person, so I would talk to, one person said, when you started talking packaging, all I could think about was, a Christmas present, putting a bow on it. I said, well, it's kind of like that, right? But just fun. It's, again, people don't know what it is. So we're going to have to do marketing awareness, what Amcor is, what we do, and then we have great paying jobs. What are those jobs? What's a day in the life look like in those jobs? And then working with Dr. Spurgeon and Westmec and others about here are the skills that we need that will enable us to hire a person right out of high school. or with Maricopa Community College as a technician right out of a 2-year program. And then what do we need from the universities, et cetera. So all that is now happening today. And we're probably not going to hire that large workforce for 2 years. But it takes the 2 years to get the pipeline going so we have ready talent now. And it's going to help the entire industry at the end of the day. Right. So
That's a great message. Yeah. Deb, can I ask you, are there specifics? I'm sure there are, but when there are partnerships involved and you at the city level, how different does that look than when industry is working with Westmac or other groups to get these young people ready to go in industry? What is that partnership like when the city's involved?
I lost you there for a minute, but I think you were asking how does the city support? At the city of Phoenix, our role is really just to uplift everybody and all the great work that's happening there, right? It's not like we're trying to come in and be the education partner or come in and be in a space that we wouldn't, right? We want to look at our Westmacs, we want to look at our employers and our adult education providers and really say, what is it that's happening out in that community and how do we make sure it gets out? We were noticing a gap at City of Phoenix. We get tons of information, right? Just being at the city, being with employers that are coming here, knowing when the folks are leaving and all of that. And we started realizing that not all of that information was getting to those workforce partners. So we created a community of practice. And that really was getting information from employers and making sure that got out to our workforce professionals, getting information from our employers and making sure it got to our education partners. There's lots happening, right? And we don't want to recreate, but if there's a space that the city can do as a workforce board and being the city, we have the ability to convene. It's something that we're really good at and getting people to the table. And that's really what we at the City of Phoenix pride ourselves in, is just getting the right people in the room that we know magic can happen. Even, becoming that apprenticeship sponsor was really not that we walked in as City of Phoenix, we want to be an apprenticeship sponsor. We were looking at, hey, there's a workforce need. How do we bring the different education partners that we know, our Westmacs and, our ASUs and our community colleges to the table to hear what needs to be developed and how do we create it? That's really our role. And then where we see a gap, we want to fill that or find someone to fill that. And then this space was sponsorship for apprenticeship. What is it that the city can do, or what is it that we need to bring? And that's really our job, is just to support everybody working in our city to help our constituents.
Dr. Spurgeon, can I ask you to follow up on that? What is it like to work at a level with industry, but also you're working with government as well? How much of all of that is just getting the right people at the table to discuss the right options?
It's critical because the information that you get from each of those groups that you bring together really helps drive the strategic mission or how you move forward. And so, dirty data in, dirty data out, clean data in, clean data out. And so when you get the right information, you're able to make the right choices. And I want to give a shout out. I really haven't talked much about the post-secondary opportunities at Westmac, but Maricopa County Community College, ASU, University of Arizona, NAU. I mean, there's just GCU. There's just a number of partners that we couldn't do the work that we do without them. And so the strategic partnerships that we have with them takes the students to that next level of a career pathway, because we can only develop, those entry-level technicians. So it's the business and industries opportunity and the post-secondary opportunities that take the students to the next level and moving up in their career path. So just want to give a shout out to our post-secondary partners, but working with governmental agencies. I mean, we have folks on a number of boards, whether that's the chambers of commerce or the economic development boards or workforce boards. We have a number of folks that sit on those boards. But we at Westmac, and the reason I think we're so successful, is that we produce results. So when we say we're going to do something, we do what we say we're going to do, and we show you the tangible results at the very end of that process to say, I'm a person that under promises and over delivers. And so I'm going to tell you what we can do, and that's all we're going to be able to do. And sometimes that may offend folks in a room because they're used to hearing someone just kind of say what you want to hear. But I'm just going to say Westmac is going to do this thing, and we're going to do that better than anybody. And this is all we can do for you. And so if that matches your needs, then Westmac's going to be an ally for you. If it doesn't, then our conversation probably needs to end, because all of us have been in those conversations that lead to nowhere. And we probably sit on a lot of boards and a lot of committees and things that literally are just planning for that next meeting, that next committee meeting, and nothing really ever changes. You look back a year from now and nothing's different. And so we choose not to sit on those kinds of boards other than to receive feedback. So we want to sit on the boards that are going to make a difference, because WestMec is about moving the vision forward, and doing what's best for students. In doing that, you got to be able to say yes, you got to be able to produce results. And that in and of itself builds credibility with business and industry to say, I'm going to continue to go to a WestMec or a Maricopa County or a Workforce Development Board, the ones that are producing the kinds of results that I need to further my business and industry.
Dr. Spurgeon, that segues well into some numbers. Can you give us some graduation rates, some job placement statistics we should know about related to WestMec?
So I think the graduation rate has gone up a little bit in Arizona. I'm going to guess it's probably in the mid 70s, maybe 76, 77% of all graduates in the state of Arizona. But if you complete a course of study in CTE, that graduation rate goes up into the mid 90s. And so that tells you there's a lot behind that statistic. It's about engagement. It's about coming to school more often. It's about being particularly aware of what you need to do to stay in that career pathway. So all of my students know and understand that every single one of our programs are hour specific. So if you miss a certain number of days, they can't even sit for certification. So they've wasted their entire time. And so my attendance rate always hovers between 95 and 97%. Our placement rates and retention rates are always between 95 and 98%. Our WestMec students are fully aware, and we do a lot of education for them to understand that these are their requirements. And why is it important? Because it keeps students engaged. It's almost like, why do you go shop at a specific grocery store? Because that grocery store has value. Why do kids come to WestMec every single day and not miss days of school? Because it has value. So when you're engaged and you see something that has value, you're more apt to get up and participate in that than less apt to not show up and I don't know, I guess not be able to finish your program or sit for that certification. So we at WestMec just do a lot of great things. The greatest thing I think we do, Stephen, and at WestMec is career literacy. And so I think it's not just one more thing we do. I think it is the thing that we do, because it allows students to see what the possibilities are and what their avenues to success may be, and allows them to lay out their plan for success to ensure that, yes, I'm sitting here in 2025 and 2027. If I do these three things through WestMec, through Maricopa County, through ASU, whatever it might be, these are the steps I have to take to ensure my success in my career pathway.
You know, WestMec is so good at that. If I could just jump in, I think our young people are hungry for that today. They want to know, what is in it for me and what do I get, right? And I think that WestMec does that. You've got skin in the game. But here's an expectation too. You don't get to retake your test 3 times because you didn't study and you didn't show up, right? Like, that's not really how life works. So you get skin in the game, and I'm going to get skin in the game, and we're both going to work really, really hard. And I value that expectation. I do know that WestMec is going to deliver for us. I do know that if WestMec is in a room and they hear an employer say something, that they're going to go I remember being in a room with all these education partners, right? And our employer mentioned one thing, and it wasn't in GCU's curriculum. And the next day they come back like a week later and they talk about curriculum. They're like, well, as of last week, we've added this. And it's that responsiveness to, I heard it, and not just like so often and sometimes in education and in workforce, right? We're like, plow ahead. This is what, ONET said, right? I don't care what ONET said. I heard from this engineer that they use Microsoft Notes. I didn't have teaching notes anywhere in my curriculum, right? I like Microsoft Office, right? But those little nuggets that you can grab. And I think our WestMacs are those folks that are grabbing that information. And if I could just cheer on what Dr. Spurgeon said, at the City of Phoenix, the articulation agreements that happen with our education partners just is light years ahead. There was no work that I needed to do in a workforce space, because our colleges and universities and our career and technical education, they're already talking and communicating and making that easier for us. So 3 cheers actually to our state and the collaboration that they've created, making it easier for workforce folks, for employers, and our students to really continue their success along the way. I just wanted to give a cheer. That's such a valuable point here.
Not Holman, I feel like you want to jump in on this.
No, I'm going, holy crap, that's exactly what I would have said. So not
Yeah.
as eloquently, but yeah, just spot on. I mean, this is a great conversation. I'm listening intently going, yes. Right?
Yes.
Well, and Scott Holman, you mentioned this earlier, but I want to know, is there anything else you can share about businesses you've worked with or other businesses that have benefited from hiring WestMec graduates? We love anecdotes and this sort of thing. And you've added a couple before, but anything else you can bring up?
Yeah, it's and Scott knows this one very, very well. So when we first started up TSMC, obviously we were going to hire 1,100 U.S. people. 300 of them were going to be manufacturing techs. I think it's being renamed manufacturing specialists now. But there was a bias around hiring high school kids into our industry from a lot of the executives at TSMC. And I don't want to toot my own horn, but I was able to say, hey, why don't we pilot this, right? And Scott had some graduates that interviewed for some of these manufacturing tech jobs, and I think the number was 9, if I'm not mistaken, Scott, right? One didn't show up, right, for the job. The other 8 are still at TSMC, right? So it was a proven pilot to where Scott's a hit, right? West Meck is a hit. We said, hey, we got really great kids out of West Meck, proven, right? Scott, what else do you have, right? Let's start interviewing. And this is before we had a semiconductor pathway at West Meck. This was people that have been through a different pathway at West Meck, but actually demonstrated good technical, sound decision-making, being innovative, were problem solvers. And these are things that they learned at West Meck that led them to be good manufacturing techs at TSMC. So I think we busted that bias or that myth out there. And now, given the number of jobs that we have to hire in our industry, it's, phase 2 for TSMC, 300 more manufacturing specialists. Amcor in 2 years, 300, kind of entry-level jobs for us as well, right? And it runs through the horizon of 3030. Right, as phase 3 at TSMC, and we're done building at Amcor. It's a huge number. Scott said earlier, it can't be one solution. It's got to be several, but West Meck is definitely a solution for us in this industry. And we need a lot of others to kind of fill our pipeline. So,
Steve, you asked earlier about some statistics, and so the labor statistics through Lightcast projects that there's going to be well over 300,000 job opportunities in Maricopa County alone, and only about 20 or 21% of those jobs are going to require a 4-year degree. So you're talking about jobs that require a certification or a credential or an industry recognized micro credential, whatever it might be, or an associate's degree. And so that shows us that we're on the path for a great success. And notwithstanding, I'm not putting a 4-year degree down at all, but I'm just simply saying, things are changing in the favor of being able to bring students on at an earlier rate. As Scott mentioned, 8 of the 9 students showed up and they're still working there. So the students are coming and they're staying. And so I think if business industry will think outside the box and begin to think about bringing on some of the high school students that graduate through our programs and develop those students through their own business and industry and their own models, their own professional development, I think they're going to get more sustainability and students to stay longer, which is what business industry wants, is that longevity of that employee to know and understand the history to be able to build something when people stay versus when they're always running in and out the door. So a lot of jobs available for CTE students coming up in the future.
Great.
Well,
We
and
only have
I
a few minutes
think-
left. Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Deb, go ahead.
sorry.
Yeah.
I was just going to say this place about training and keeping people engaged, right? As employers, if we see that value in keeping our employees engaged in training, even that 4-year degree can be something, right? It can be something in the future. And sometimes young people, they don't want to get riddled with guilt. And sometimes they think they can't. It's so often, I was dealing with a family member who just, college wasn't the jam, wanted to go in this, mechanic job, which I knew, this was a great position. Well, at the end of the day, actually, guess where those classes are? At the community college, right? So it also is a way entry into people to also I could do this, but I'm coming into an area that a job I interest, and then that education comes by and they're like, wow, actually I can do this. I can get my 4-year degree and maybe I want to continue. Yeah. All right. Sorry.
Thanks. No,
this is what happens when you get us together.
No, that's great. No, it's awesome. I just had a couple of viewer questions I want to make sure we get to. And actually, Kate and Melissa asked fairly similar questions. Are there opportunities to add language, Spanish, et cetera, as a skill in specific CTE pathways? Son is a West Med graduate, now a junior in construction engineering at ASU. After a summer internship, he shared that being bilingual would be an amazing asset in his field, thinking the same would be the case in healthcare professions. Wondering if there are discussions about this. Dr. Spurgeon, you want to start on that?
Absolutely. In fact, about probably a week or so ago, I talked with my student services team, and they brought to me an opportunity for us to be able to provide credentials for multi-language students. We think could be a great opportunity for them to be able to put themselves at the top of the stack. And so we're looking into the possibility and what credentials or what licensure might be available to ensure that our students get everything they possibly can through Westpac. So the answer is yes, we're looking into it. If it's possible, it's going to happen.
And how important to all of you think that is, Deb?
I think that's incredibly important. Thinking about our healthcare partners and the opportunities in that pathway, and having some additional language skills just could really talk about you being the choice over another candidate. That right there is going to move your resume above. I love that question and love that thought and continued. How do we build that into the work that our schools are already doing?
And Scott Holman, to go back to, not to overemphasize the TSMC, but people had talked about, well, do I need to learn Mandarin or something like that to work with some of these other companies coming? Is that something, not just learning Spanish, which is obviously very important in our area, but what about something like Mandarin?
Obviously at TSMC, right? Mandarin, right? So half the population out there, if not greater, are Asian speakers, right? So Mandarin is one of those languages. If I think about Amcor, right? It's an American Korean company. And so would Korean be a benefit? Absolutely. Absolutely. Because we're going to learn from the experts from Korea, right? English is their second language. How do we bridge that gap, at least early on, where we're able to be bilingual in our communication with our US suppliers, our construction workers, our facilities folks, and communication is not the issue that we have in erecting a building, right? Real quick. So fundamentally, I think it makes sense, right? How we do it and which language do you pick, and right. But I also think there's learning a second language, which I did not learn any Mandarin when I was in China or at TSMC. I know how to order a cold beer, and that's it. But would have been helpful? Absolutely. Would it be a plus one? I think so, right? In a hiring, right? Especially early on when you're starting to build.
Before we have a closing message, I have one more question that was not formed as a question, but it came up in our chat. And I'm not sure who to ask you on this, but we talk a lot about, because of where Westmec is located, what's going on in the valley. But what about rural opportunities? Are those things that are there? Because there are a lot of people who live in Arizona who don't quite live in, we know a huge percentage live in Phoenix, but not all. What about that? Making connections with those outside the metro area, Dr. Spurgeon?
So interesting question you ask. The Arizona Education Economic Commission, the AEEC, was headed up by Edward Cota, Chief Strategy Officer with ADE. And again, shout out to ADE, because Superintendent Horn has been tremendously supportive of CTE and our efforts. ADE has been extremely supportive in all of their efforts to move this narrative forward, not only in the state, but nationally. But early on in the AEC, they brought in a company called Immersion Labs, and they have some AI technology which is built around allowing students to have access to resources or practice activities if they don't have access, say, to a hospital or to, a mom and pop automotive tech shop and things. So we purchased this software. Now we have it for medical assisting and aesthetics program, and it's AI technology, which allows students to practice that forward-facing or front-facing patient conversations in step-by-step process. It gives them the outside experience if they don't have access to other resources inside their regular classroom. So there is AI technology is the leveling of the playing field. So if you're a first-year teacher or a 20-year teacher, it doesn't matter, because AI technology gives you the same presentation, the same training every single time. AI technology never doesn't get sick. It doesn't miss a day. It doesn't miss anything. It's the same level of excellence every single day in training and preparing students for whether it's soft skills, professional skills, or those hardline technical skills. It gives the rural areas, the reservation areas, the opportunity to have outside the classroom experience inside their regular classroom. AI technology is a game changer.
100% agree, Scott, and I will advocate for the Department of Education. I saw Kevin Imes was actually in the chat. But there's 14 CTEDs across the state of Arizona, everywhere across the state of Arizona. So using AI that Scott's talking about and just putting the course that they built right at Westmec, it's transferable. 13 other CTEDs out there, you can use it using technology, right, to actually deliver the same type of training to individuals in those rural areas at those other CTEDs. So
Great. Okay. We're down to the end of this. So I'm going to do the old, I'm going to leave you on, and this is impossible with this group, but just so articulate and likes to talk. Can I ask each of you for like a 30-second takeaway from this? The people who are they've only got 2 minutes to watch this. They don't have the whole hour. The quick takeaway, Dr. Spurgeon, I'm going to go around the horn. I'm going to start with you, 30 to 45 seconds. What's the takeaway from this meeting we just had?
The takeaway for me is I recognize that we have some of the most incredible professionals in and around the Phoenix area. And my takeaway would be if we could all just take a step back and take a look at, are the things that we're doing right now, this very day, going to make a difference in 3 to 5 years? Are we planning and preparing for what's coming? Or are we dealing with the things that we've dealt with in the past? We need to be forward thinking. We need to work collaboratively together. We need to think about strategically, how can we produce the highest quality CTE professionals, workforce professionals, and do it in a very collaborative way.
Deb, how about you?
Get involved. If you're an employer, education, get involved. Your local workforce boards are here to help and get connected with your education partners. If you don't know where to start, call your local workforce board to help you get connected to the right folks. We've got solutions and funding and connections to help.
Scott Holman, you get the last word.
Yeah, oh, excellent. It might go a little bit longer then, Steve. So no, I wrote down.
Wait, I want
things.
my time back.
And I'll elaborate. So I wrote down 3 things. Collaboration with industry is key, right? Multiple solutions are required, and industry owes education a platform, the engagement that they need to set these future employees up for success when they come interview for our jobs.
That didn't take long at all. Okay. Well, that's all for this Arizona Capital Times Morning Scoop, BASE Workforce Building Tomorrow's Talent Ecosystem. Thank all of you for watching us live. Obviously, this will be up on YouTube, Arizona Capital Times YouTube channel later on. Thanks to our panelists, especially Dr. Scott Spurgeon, Superintendent of WestMec, Deb Furlong, Business and Workforce Development with the City of Phoenix, and Scott Holman, Founder and CEO of HHR Consulting LLC, currently supporting Amcor Technology. You guys were fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today. And I'm Steve Goldstein. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks again, folks.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.